thought I would show you some recent eBay purchases. Quite appropriate given that we've just done the Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 1. Just seen that. Very cool. So this I got as part of just like a random sort of job lot of stuff that this guy kind of threw into this auction for no apparent reason. But it's quite cool and very, very topical. So a little pin badge there. I'm watching this guy called Froggy Flips on YouTube quite a lot at the moment. It's fascinating. He's in America and they do this sort of yard sale concept where, you know, that we just don't do here in Britain. People don't have garage sales or garage sales and all that sort of good stuff. We don't do yard sales because many of us don't have yards, of course. But these guys do in America, and he picks up all sorts of stuff. But really, the nearest I think that we get here is these cabinets that people have in antique centres. You know, where they just sort of they hire cabinets and they put stuff in the cabinets, and you know you can just sort of buy stuff straight out of the cabinets. So they may not actually have their own stalls, although some of them do as well. So, you know, a lot of the stuff I do just randomly pick up from surfing eBay. You know, so we had a Spock there. But the main thing that was in this, actually, I'll show you this as well. This is quite interesting because I've got one of these in a packet, and I've done a video on it before now. This is an Ertl bird of prey. But this is from Star Trek 5, and the original version of it was very just plain blue. For this one, they actually coloured it, but because the one I have is in a packet, I didn't know that they'd actually coloured the wings rather nicely underneath. And the bird of prey in the movies do have this sort of coloration. This is in the original movies now, you know, this is the Kirk era, Shatner era movies. They do have this sort of coloration on the wings, and this bird of prey from Ertl does actually have it, whereas the original one, as I say, just this funny sort of pale blue colour. So that was nice to find that out, because I did not know that. And that came with the stand as well. So it's this wonderful job lot, and it's one of those things that when it arrived, I'd sort of half forgotten what I'd actually got. So it was quite a nice surprise. Also got this. That's not Star Trek. But they also had a random Death Star lying around. I've no idea if it actually does anything. It looks... I can't decide if these lines here are actually because it opens or whether it's just the way it was put together. So I might have to have a little sort of fiddle with that in due course and just see if it does actually do anything else. But it may just be the way it's been constructed. Now another thing that came from that auction was this as well. And again, I don't know whether I was just half asleep when I went for it, but I got this rather interesting book. From the original Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, with Montalbland's version. And it's actually it's a read-along book, so there should have been a tape with it, but there wasn't with this particular version. But I rather like the front cover, just for, I mean, it's scrappy, but it's a nice sort of shot of the Enterprise taking a shot at the Reliance torpedo launches there. But it's quite nice. It's got, you know, it's got proper photos from the film in it. So yeah, it's again, as I said, I mean that's a nice shot as well of the sort of the battle damage being formed there as the Reliant broadsides the Enterprise. It's really cool. I had no idea that was going to be coming as part and parcel of the auction. So that was cool. I've also done other things here as well. I mean, I do remember these sorts of books from when I was little, where you got the sort of, oh, that's nice. Actually, that's a nice sort of summary of the ones that you could get as well. I can imagine that somebody would collect things like that because the cards actually look quite nice as well. Yeah, interesting. They had that one. I had this one, Planet of... I remember that. Planet of the Hoojibs. Yeah. Isn't that bizarre? This is what I love about eBay. You can get the most random things that then trigger you into finding other completely random things that you actually remember. I mean, the algorithms are very good for that anyway, but just sometimes you don't get that without actually buying the stuff. What else have we got? So I got this thing. Now, this claims it was an antique, but it actually says HKD 2002 on it, but I don't think that is actually its date. I think it's something else. These seem to come in a variety of flavours, different colours, because I've seen a few other auctions for them. But what makes me think it is old is this. Now, I don't know that much about this sort of thing, but using rivets like that, I believe, is quite old school. And this reminded me of, I think it's Jason of Star Command. It's a very, very old TV show that I vaguely remember watching when I was very little on Channel 4. And this reminds me of a ship from that. I don't even think it is exactly the same at all, but it just had that sort of, it just, you know how something just sort of has that sort of pattern recognition thing in your head. So that's why I got that. Anyway, it was like a 5 or something. I wasn't that fussed about it. I was curious really, but not seemingly made by any sort of well-known toy company that I'm familiar with at all. In a similar vein, this reminded me very much of my childhood as well. This guy is from Once Upon a Time Life and things like Once Upon a Time Space and all sorts of stuff. And I think it was a French series originally, a cartoon, but it was quite educational. And it went through different sort of periods and different themes. But this guy was one of the constant characters, basically. I think on the auction it said he was called Maestro. But I've never ever seen. Well, I think Leicester Vintage once picked up one of these or saw one of these when they were on tour, but I don't think I've ever seen one anywhere before. I couldn't even find a comparative for his pricing, so I may have paid over the odds for him. But he seems to be in sort of reasonable shape, and he's got both of his antennae intact as well. So I guess that's a good thing. I just liked it because it was very quirky, and I do remember that series very fondly. Now, story behind this. This is Captain Britain, and we've seen Captain Carter in the Marvel films being a version of Captain Britain, albeit with a sort of with a shield and so on. But this is the version of Captain Britain that I remember from sort of the 80s, and I believe he was associated with the Knights of the Pendragon. So he had some sort of Merlin Arthur kind of linkage to his powers, I believe. But he was effectively a super soldier like Captain America, of course. But the funny thing is, there are so many different words for Britain and the United Kingdom and the British Isles and all that sort of good stuff that you could be forgiven for not knowing what Britain actually is. So I just thought it'd be fun to pick him up because he was loose, so he wasn't very expensive. And he's very nicely coloured. It's a really nice sort of paint on him. He's in the Marvel Infinite series. But what I was actually looking for was Death's Head, because I discovered that Death's Head came out in the Marvel Infinite series, but annoyingly he's really expensive. So I saw him, didn't buy it, and when I came back to buy it, he'd been bought. So clearly I missed a trick there. Which just goes to show, the more you hesitate with these things, sometimes you do come to regret it. I also picked up this. Now, again, this I've seen on Leicester Vintage, and this is basically a Thunderbirds knockoff. What do you call them? Yes, it's a knockoff or a bootleg, depending on sort of what your view is. I think this is more of a knockoff because it's not pretending it's Thunderbirds, but it's called Firebirds. Die-cast metal with plastic parts. Well, it's fair enough. It's saying what it says on the tin. It was originally, is that £1.69 or is that something else? I can't even figure out what that pricing actually is. I mean, these are quite old, I believe. Made in Taiwan, but looks like it was from Long Beach, California, and it is very clearly a Thunderbird 3 knockoff, but with a sort of a strange American Air Force type badge on the side of it, and it's got a sort of orangey yellow body, but effectively that is Thunderbird 3 with some undercarriage apparently, which of course Thunderbird 3 never originally had. And this is cards. It's slightly coming off the card. Yeah, it's coming off the card a little bit actually, which I couldn't really tell until I had a closer look at it. But it seems to be sort of, so I'm guessing maybe someone's taken it out at some point. Ah, now that's interesting. This is interesting. So we've got all of the various teams. We've got a space missile that looks suspiciously like the mole. Firebirds, a terrific team of spaceships ready for launching. Special space launcher blast off, super sleek, lightning fast Firebirds. Okay, so they had a sort of launch. That was a launch gimmick. So we had Firebird 1, which is obviously Thunderbird 1. Space Missile, which is the mole. Firebird 1 again, for no apparent reason, with blatant USA markings on it, clearly. Firebird 3, which is what I'm holding. Yeah, and another one of Firebird 3. So yeah, I mean, clearly. So it's 1978. Copyright 1978. I think that's a really interesting one, actually. So I mean, that's a properly old thing to still have a bit of a card with it as well. So I'm quite pleased I grabbed that, because I knew what it was. I'd heard of it, but that was the first time I'd ever actually seen it. And again, one of those things that I wasn't looking for. Just I often land on these stores on eBay, and then I just sort of end up browsing through them for God knows how long, just because it's interesting to see what else is on them, you know. This I picked up. This I think I have a couple of single issues of. But this is a modern version of Death's Head with a different version of Death's Head in it. So given that I've read Death's Head stuff since he first came out in the Transformers comics, and indeed other Marvel comics separately first, to make sure that Marvel owned him rather than Hasbro, interestingly. But this is very much his logo that I'm used to seeing. That's the traditional old-fashioned Death's Head logo. So it was nice to grab this as the sort of collected version, which I knew was out there, but I just hadn't. Again, it was just one of those things that I tripped across this and thought, oh yeah, I remember that, but had otherwise completely forgotten about it. But that'll be cool to have a look at. And that's quite funny, because I remember noticing this in the single issue. That is Death's Head 2. So there's a sort of sticker on the back of somebody's hand that is a little sort of nod of the head to other versions of Death's Head, even within that version, which is clever of them. So fair dues, they obviously knew their stuff. Now, what else did I get? You can tell when I'm a bit card late. This interested me. This is actually a computer game, strangely, or a comic book adventure, but it runs off the computer. But this image of an alien, so the sort of alien that you saw in the second Alien film, very much reminds me of the time when I was massively into my Dark Horse comics, which were incredibly difficult to get in the United Kingdom. This was early 90s probably. But this guy was on the cover of the collected versions of Dark Horse comics that I got at the time. And I think he was also on some of the singles sort of comics that I did manage to find in dedicated comic stores, which were the American format comics. So I couldn't really sort of pass this one up. I haven't actually looked inside it. So by Mindscape, you can see the Dark Horse logo there as well. Well, this is supposed to be complete. So it's got a booklet in it with that rather nice image on it. So I'm really not sure how. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Oh, but it's a USS Sheridan. Was that before or after Babylon 5, I wonder? That's interesting. Anyway, it's a USS Sheridan, apparently. Brilliant. Planet B54C, Alpha Centauri. Interesting. So yeah, it's really. I have no idea if this would actually work on a modern system, but I do still have a disk drive in my machine, actually, because I'm that old school. So it is possible that will actually work for me. I don't know. Just one of two. I think it came with both discs. Yeah. Yeah, this is a CD-ROM, children, for those of you who've never actually seen one, of which there could be some these days, I guess. Yeah, so he's definitely got the second CD-ROM in there. Looks like I'll need a bit of a wipe down, but it's it might work. It might work. So I'll have to have a look at that. And brilliant. Oh, look at this system requirements. I'm loving it. I'm tearing that already. That's not good. Oh, I didn't quite. system requirements. I love it. 4860x266 or better. Brilliant. 8 meg of RAM, 20 megabyte hard disk space, Super VGA Visa compatible video card. Oh, bless it. 2 times CD-ROM drive. That takes me right back. That really, really does. And of course, DOS or Windows 95 running in DOS mode. Brilliant. Good God, that's old. That's brilliant. Even that makes me. This is what I love about getting this random stuff. It just makes me smile because it's just like takes me right back to when you measured RAM on your PC in megabytes rather than terabytes or gigabytes, at least these days, I suppose. That's hilarious. Okay, grand. No idea if that's actually going to work, but we'll see. Now then, I picked up these, and does this bring back any memories for you? Because obviously it does for me, because I bought it, but I just wonder if anyone else actually remembers this stuff. Capsella 200 this is. And I've had a quick look at it, and it's definitely smaller than I remember. But basically, it's a sort of linking motorized battery powered thing where you get propeller kits with it and wheels and floats, and it just allows you to construct things and try stuff out to see whether or not it actually moves as you'd expect it to move and so on. And it's just a good wheeze, and I used to love these when I was little. It's the sort of thing that you would have picked up in the Science Museum in London in its shop, which you simply would not find anywhere else. That is the best way I can describe it to you. Either that or in the old Innovations catalogue, one of the two. And if you thought that one, I can't even show you the proper scale of this one, but this one is huge. This is a 400 set, but you can see here, these floats I remember very distinctly. I actually took Capsella down to the beach and ran it on little pools on the beach to see if my sort of thinking would work. And the great thing is, the way it's constructed, I was able to keep the battery out of the way of the seawater. So, the plastic itself obviously didn't care. But it was just a really good construction system that allowed you to try all sorts of different stuff out. So I really enjoyed it. And obviously you can just pretend it's spaceships and stuff as well. It's all good. But yeah, so those seem to be from two very different eras. I think it's been around for a number of years, in various sort of flavours. So just interesting to pick those up and see if they're still functional, really. So I might do a separate video on them. So from one of these sellers, I also got these, and this is quite unusual for me because I've actually got the magazines and the models attached to them for Star Trek Eaglemoss collections, and I had to squint a little bit because I didn't know just from the numbers whether or not I had these already. But actually, when I squinted hard at the photos, I could tell that these are actually ships that I don't have in my collection, and it was 4 for about 20 quid or something. So for a 5 each with the magazines, quite frankly, it would have been rude not to. So I did. This one's quite a nice one. I think this is it's a training ship. I think it's one that Wesley Crusher zipped around in with his what are they called? His sort of, they the red team or something, like this elite cadet squadron who were a bit naughty basically. But I thought that was quite nice. I can't decide if that's yellowed or if it's supposed to be that colour. The actual picture, the picture of the wing makes it look like it could be that colour normally, actually. So that might not be an error as such, or but if it had been stuck in a shop window, it might have lost its colour. This one's might have been opened by somebody. It's through the band Cell Ship, but I mean, it's one of the least exciting ship designs ever because it's just like a sort of octahedron or something similar to that. So I wouldn't have chosen to get that one, but I guess from a completist point of view, it is another one. And it comes with a magazine. So this one is an interesting one because I thought I was going to make my typical error of getting one that I already had, but this isn't a Maquis fighter. This is a Federation attack fighter. as you can see there. So it isn't one that I have already, but it is very similar to a Maquis fighter and the Nightingale ship from Voyager as well. So it'll be interesting to see what the magazine actually says about it in terms of the origins of the model's designs, because that was number 68. So yeah, I mean, a full bundle of Eaglemoss for less than I would normally pay for a single one without the magazine. So that's pretty cool. Finally, the last two elements of this. I mean, I think the postie was going to be sick of me because I was getting so many random parcels of various shapes and sizes. But that's a not very subtle hint at a video that I'll be doing in due course, because this is the one flavour of Thunderbird 1 from the UK, which I didn't have. Now, the sounds aren't working. I think it was sold as working, but obviously it may not have been sent with a battery in it. So I'm going to have to open her up and have a little look at her. But obviously this is a Carlton Thunderbird 1. So it's a Soundtech one. So it should make noises. And it's not one that I've had before, but I will be showing you a few other examples of these in due course. So that sort of completes, I think that completes the ones I need for that particular exercise. And finally, one that I have bid on in the past and not been successful on is this. So I finally have in my hot sticky hands an example of a Dinky Shadow 2. It does not have a missile, but it does, nevertheless, and I've discovered how to open it now. It does, however, have a missile launcher there, which does have a spring. So I think that it will fire, should I wish it to, because the mechanism seems to be there, and the spring seems happy enough to retract once it's got something on it. But it's got its windshield, and it's got its tracks, and it's got both its tracks, in fact. Now, I have no idea how you tell replacement tracks from original tracks, but I have the feeling they might be original, because the rest of the vehicle seems very, very original. I think it's in quite decent shape for one of them, as far as I can tell. So all you have to do, and this is a little reference point, I figured this out for myself. Basically, if you rotate that round, you can then rotate it and it flips, and then you just flick it that way and it locks in again. So now it's actually it's not at all obvious how you're supposed to do that. It took me a little while just to realise that there was something on the, and I kind of half thought it was that for some reason. I don't know quite why, but it's I'm going to do it up against the Matchbox Battle King. You can see why I thought they were sort of related, but they're not at all, apart from being a similar sort of concept. But I never actually had this, and I think I ended up with a Battle King instead of this, presumably because these weren't available at the time when I was looking for one, because time probably got on, they probably weren't in the shops anymore when I was little. So I'm quite happy with that, because I've got a nice example of the UFO Interceptor as well. So I've now got not quite all the Dinky examples from that sort of particular era, but it's nice to have at least some of them. So yeah, so that was my sort of slightly, I mean, this is how random it is. So I've got Jerry Anderson, I've got Star Trek original series, I've got Star Trek Next Generation, I've got Aliens, I've got it's just this. We've got Captain Britain. Oh, God. We've got knockoff Thunderbirds. We've got not knockoff Thunderbirds. I've got a Death Star for no apparent reason, which I have no idea why I've got, but it's like, you just can't write it sometimes, you really can't. And Once Upon a Time Life, of course. Marvellous. So yeah, so that was just my sort of random grouping of items from eBay, which I thought you might be sort of amused to see, because you can come across all sorts. I mean, the real trick with eBay, I find, is coming across a nice sort of job lot that just, the person who's selling it doesn't really know what it is. But if you just browse, I mean, it's a real time sink, admittedly. But if you just browse for a while, sometimes you just happen to spot something that you recognise, which the seller doesn't, and that just gives you this opportunity to to lay hands on something that perhaps you wouldn't otherwise have found, and which you can get for a more reasonable price than would otherwise have been the case because no one else has recognised it. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's not cheap, but it's the other thing I recommend as well, and this is new to me. I'm sure it's old to everyone else who's using eBay, but because I've only got back into using eBay relatively recently, there is definitely a tendency for people to offer you reductions once you've just watched an item. So I wouldn't recommend. I mean, it's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? Because if you don't buy it immediately, someone else might do. But if you wait a few minutes, the system will often, I think, automatically spit a discounted offer out for you to accept. And that can save you pounds. It does add up if you're buying even if you're buying a few cheaper things, it's probably worth just being a little bit patient and seeing if you do get those reduced offers, because then you do save yourself a lot of money and it offsets some of the postage costs. And indeed, apparently the only way you can get reduced postage costs is to wait for the seller to offer you a discount on the postage. I made the mistake of buying something, then asking for a discount, because sometimes I've had refunds back. But actually, if you go too far down the line, they can't give you a discount after the fact. So a little bit of waiting is sometimes not a bad thing with these things, it seems. So anyway, I'll probably do some separate videos on a number of these, and I'm continuing to hunt down a few things. I'm going to an actual toy fair tomorrow, all things being equal, which will be the first time I've ever tried doing that, and I'm going to try and be fairly specific about what I'm trying to get, fill in some of the gaps I haven't got on eBay. Because I've now come across two things on eBay which I want, which I just can't find, ironically. So I am now establishing a list of things that I'm going to have to hunt for off eBay effectively and just kind of ask around for. So it'll be really interesting to see what this toy fair is actually like, in the flesh, so to speak, and sort of see who's there. I'm going to see Cosmic Toys. They're going to be there. So that'll be all good. So I'm quite looking forward to that. It'll be a little bit of an adventure. And then I'll see. I'll let you know afterwards how it's gone. I may even try and take some footage while I'm there. I don't know what sort of rules and regs are around it, but we'll see. Okay. Cheers for now. Please do like and subscribe. Thank you.